This story is about how pure, unadulterated jealousy can utterly destroy a person's life, leading to things far darker than you can imagine. Before we dive in, let's quickly set the scene with the names, as they're important. Sierra's grandfather, Mr. Robert Sierra's father, Mr. Alex, Sierra's uncle, Mr. Tony, Sierra's grandmother, Mrs. Grace. Remember these names. After this terrifying incident, Mr. Tony was left completely mentally disabled. Now, let's tell this tale. Mr. Robert had a great job, a rarity back then, and he brought in good money. Robert's own father had married twice. Robert was from the first marriage, and his step-siblings were from the second. Robert lived with his family in one house, and his step-family, his step-brothers, their mother, lived right next door. Because Robert had a stable government job and money, he married Grace, a woman from a wealthy, respectable family. Their wedding was huge, a huge celebration. All this success was unbearable for the family next door. The stepmother and stepbrothers were consumed by jealousy. They could barely speak to Robert and his family, so deep was their resentment. Robert always avoided them, preferring to keep the peace. He had no idea the terrifying price his own son, Tony, would pay for this bitter envy. Robert decided to tear down his old house, a small clapboard home, in a historic neighborhood in Charleston, South Carolina, and build something modern. He was successful and respected, so he focused on quality. Brand new vinyl siding, big windows, a beautiful lawn, and even a dedicated guest suite. Neighbors passing by would comment that Robert's house was one of the finest in the entire city, but the Step family next door watched the construction every single day from their rooftop. Robert's wife, Grace, found their constant staring and overt jealousy disturbing. Robert simply told her, "Just ignore them, Grace. Don't throw stones into the mud. It only splashes back on you." Once the home was finished, Robert, Grace, and their two sons, Alex, the eldest, and Tony, the youngest, had a massive housewarming party. The house was filled with joy, laughter, and light. Everyone thought this was a fresh, happy start for the family. But Robert didn't know that behind those new walls, a powerful hatred was lurking, ready to steal his family's peace and happiness forever. For a few weeks, everything was perfect. Grace managed the home, Alex was busy with high school, and little Tony, just 8 years old, was the life of the party. Tony was a typical kid, played baseball after school, was always laughing, and yes, he was a little crybaby too. But just weeks after moving into the new home, Tony's behavior started to change. Everyone noticed. The talkative, playful boy became silent. He wouldn't play with his toys. Teachers at school reported that Tony, once sharp and focused, was now distracted and unable to concentrate. The strangest change. Tony started sleepwalking. He would wake up in the middle of the night and wander, standing silently on the stairs or staring into a dark corner. His laughter vanished. He started doing bizarre things like screaming for no reason or talking to himself. One day, Grace found Tony standing by the window, speaking into the empty air. "I'm talking to you. Why aren't you listening?" he insisted. Grace rushed over. "Tony, honey, who are you talking to?" With a completely blank, expressionless face, Tony replied, "The one who calls me every night." Robert and Grace initially thought it was stress or maybe just the pressure of a new school. But Tony got worse. His eyes were constantly bloodshot, like he hadn't slept for weeks. His screams became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes his voice would change, from a thin, childish sound to a deep, resonant voice, like that of a grown man. The biggest shock came one night when Grace saw Tony standing in front of the hallway mirror. He was smiling at his reflection, but his image was not in the glass. Grace realized something deeply wrong was happening. She told Robert, but he dismissed it, busy with work, thinking she was just overreacting. One late night, Alex, 15, was studying in his room when he heard footsteps outside. He figured it was Tony sleepwalking. He opened his door to check, and what he saw froze the blood in his veins. It wasn't Tony on the stairs. It was a tall, black shadow. The shadow was slowly descending the staircase, but its feet were not touching the steps. Alex screamed, "Mom! Dad!" Robert and Grace rushed out. By the time they got there, the stairs were empty. Alex was sobbing, telling them about the shadow. Being a 15-year-old, his parents comforted him, thinking it was a bad dream or an overactive imagination. They were tucking Alex back into bed when they heard it. A woman sobbing coming from Tony's room. Grace quietly walked toward Tony's room. Robert stayed with Alex. Grace slowly opened the door. Tony was asleep in his bed, but sitting right above his head was a woman. She wasn't crying. She was laughing, staring right at Grace. Grace screamed, "Robert!" The woman laughed harder. Her expression was joyous, like she had been waiting for Grace and was delighted to see her fear. The sound, however, remained a mournful cry. Robert ran in. "What is it?" Grace pointed, trembling. "There, the woman, by Tony's head." Robert looked. No one was there, but he noticed something on the pillow, long strands of black hair. Something had been there. He calmed Grace down, assuring her it was stress. But he knew the truth. This wasn't an illusion. Robert began watching everything. He needed confirmation. The next night, around 3 a.m., a terrifying scream ripped through the house. Everyone rushed to Tony's room. The sight was horrifying. Tony was hunched over, and a black shadow was hovering over him. When Tony spoke, it wasn't just his voice. It sounded like 3 or 4 voices, speaking simultaneously, inhuman and distorted. Tony kept repeating one phrase. "He's here to take me. Let me go." Robert and Grace grabbed him, but the 8-year-old had an unnatural strength. They couldn't hold him. As soon as they relaxed their grip, Tony shot out of their hands and sprinted toward the attic access, laughing maniacally. They chased him up to the roof. When they reached the top, Tony was gone. In the dead of night at 3:30 a.m., little Tony had jumped off the roof. Grace collapsed, passing out instantly. Alex was weeping. Robert scrambled down, found Tony's broken body, rushed to a neighbor, and sped toward the hospital. Tony was rushed into the ICU. His condition was critical. He needed immediate brain surgery. Robert went back home to check on Grace and Alex. They were at the neighbor's house. He entered his own house first to look for Grace and saw a woman. This time, a visible figure running through the house, straight into Tony's empty room. He heard Grace's frantic crying from next door and ran there. He found her hysterically calling Tony's name. Robert held her, whispering, "He's fine, Grace. He fell, but he's safe. They're operating now. He's going to be okay." With the crisis somewhat contained, the neighbor insisted, "You and Alex go to the hospital. Grace and the boy will stay here tonight. I'll go with you." Grace called her mother and told her everything. Her mother was clear. "Call a spiritualist immediately. This is not normal. This is black magic." A local priest or spiritualist came to the house. He confirmed their worst fears. "Someone performed dark magic on your home. Things will not be right until that object is removed. Robert searched the house, tearing it apart, but found nothing related to the curse. He reported back to the spiritualist, who then explained, the item wasn't left out, it was buried. The priest told Robert exactly where to dig. Under Tony's bed, beneath the floorboards. Robert went back with a crew, removed the bed, tore up the floor tiles, and there it was. A small clay urn buried deep in the ground. No one dared open it. They brought the sealed urn straight back to the spiritualist. The priest instructed Robert to take the urn to an old, isolated area with large trees behind the property and bury it under a huge oak tree. Robert did as he was told. When he returned, the priest purified the exact spot where the urn was found with holy water, chanted prayers, and performed a complete house-cleansing ritual. He declared, "It is done. The entity is gone." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The curse was lifted. But they were tragically wrong. In the hospital, Tony was left permanently mentally disabled. The massive trauma to his head had damaged his cognitive functions irreversibly. Doctors explained they did everything they could, but if they had pushed further, Tony would have died. His ability to think and reason was gone. As life moved on, Alex grew up, got an education, and found a good job. Tony, however, was completely lost. He became mentally disabled, unable to care for himself. Years later, Alex had a daughter, Sierra, the one who shared the story. Sierra knows, as does the whole family, exactly who did this. The jealous stepbrother and his mother next door. They used black magic out of pure envy, but the family chose not to confront them, fearing they might target Alex next. And what happened to the jealous family? Karma hit them hard. Both of the stepbrothers met tragic early ends in separate accidents. The third one became an alcoholic, a living wreck with no family or job. The mother, now elderly, is forced to work menial jobs, washing dishes and clothes, just to survive. They are alive, but their lives are worse than death. They are full of regret for using black magic and destroying a child's life. They say that anyone who uses dark entities to harm others will have a horrible end. You cannot harm others and expect good things in return. My name is Alex. I'm a police officer. This incident happened during the peak of the worldwide lockdown. It's a true personal experience. This took place on the coast of Northern California, but due to my job, I can't name the exact location. That night, my shift was at the precinct, but my partner, Ray, and I went out on patrol to check the surrounding area. Our jurisdiction included a local beach. Right behind the shoreline, there was a small wooded area. We often went there to make sure no one was breaking the lockdown rules by hanging out on the beach. We drove down the isolated road, parked the car, and walked toward the water. It was incredibly quiet. Ray and I stood there, looking at the ocean, enjoying the silence and the cold air. Suddenly, Ray stopped dead. He pointed out into the water. "Look, over there." I took his binoculars. In the water, something was bobbing. It was round and metallic, like a huge potato, or maybe a large marine animal. "Let's go check it out." I switched on my flashlight and we walked along the wet sand toward the edge of the waves. There, half submerged in the water, was a large sack, a massive burlap bag stuffed tightly as if someone had compressed something huge inside. Ray remarked, "What the heck is in that thing?" We both had a suspicion, a body. I poked it with a stick. Something firm but not exactly soft. Ray poked it too. You think it's a corpse? The way the sack was swollen made us think a body had been in the water for a while, swelling up inside the bag. Ray put his ear against it, trying to hear or feel anything. I'm guessing it's a body. We should report this to dispatch, I said. Ray shined his light on my face. First, let's confirm it. We grabbed the heavy sack and struggled to pull it away from the tide. It was incredibly heavy, but completely still. I handed Ray my utility knife. He carefully slit the top of the sack. The moment he cut it, the bag burst open. Half a body spilled out. We both stumbled backward, hit by an immediate, overwhelming stench. The corpse's arms were crossed over his chest, eyes closed, face slightly swollen. The bottom half was still inside the sack. Ray, with a professional calm, examined the body. He felt the skin, checked for a pulse. He's long gone. Deceased. I looked at the face in the beam of my flashlight. Let's leave it and call it in. We had no cell service there, so I had to call the station on the radio. They told us everyone was out on emergency lockdown duty, and the nearest team, an ambulance and a crime scene unit, would take 2 hours to get there. In cop time, that means 4 or 5 hours. We were stuck. We took pictures of the body and the scene with our cell phones. Then Ray sat down on the dry sand to keep watch, while I tried to stay awake. It was 1 a.m. After about 30 minutes of sitting there, my eyes growing accustomed to the darkness, I looked out at the ocean. Something was glimmering in the water. I squinted, trying to see what it was. Then the body moved. The head of the corpse slowly tilted. I jumped back, clutching my flashlight. I shined the dimmed light on the body. Its neck was twitching. Before I could process the terror, the body pulled itself completely out of the sack and stood up. It slowly, heavily began to walk toward the ocean. I screamed. Ray woke up immediately, scrambling to his feet. What's wrong? Why are you yelling? I pointed, speechless, at the figure walking into the waves. He first looked at the sand. The sack was empty. Then he saw the corpse walking into the surf. Ray ran toward the water, shouting, "Hey, stop!" Freeze. The body paid no attention. It just kept walking. By the time we reached the water's edge, it was chest deep and sank completely beneath the waves. We stood there, staring at the empty ocean, completely stunned. Moments later, we saw headlights. The ambulance and the detectives were finally arriving. Ray and I told them exactly what we saw: a dead body standing up and walking into the sea. But there was nothing to see. The burlap sack was gone. Even more chillingly, when we checked our phones, not a single photo of the body existed. Every picture was just a shot of the sand and the water. Of course, they mocked us. The investigation went nowhere because there was no evidence and no one was reported missing in the area. A few days later, a colleague told me that night was a new moon, Amavas. On nights like that, strange things happen near the coast. We had no proof, no trace, nothing to support our story of seeing a dead body come to life and walk into the water.